Welcome back to Climate TV with me, Eduardo Gonçalves. Today I'm joined by Emma Stewart from Autodesk. Emma, thanks very much for joining us. First of all, what is Autodesk doing to tackle climate change, and is there a business opportunity for you there?
We are committed to tackling the issue of climate change because it is hugely material to our customers. So, as a software company that serves the engineering, the design, the architecture disciplines, our customers are literally making environmental decisions every day that can lock in environmental footprints for 50, 100, 150 years hence. So, whether they know it or not, they are climate actors. So we see it as a business opportunity to bring them better intelligence through the means of our tools to make those environmental decisions to be sound and ones that also have ancillary business benefits, whether it's a higher performing building that has greater productivity, higher rental rates, a better property value, or an infrastructure project that is not delayed because it has the buy-in of the community on the basis of its environmental profile. Or manufactured products that themselves have considered the life cycle and the take back and the efficiency in use of those products. So we are in the business of climate change, if you will, because it is an expectation, increasingly, of our customers to act on it, and in so doing, a business opportunity for us.
So you've created this new tool to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions called the Corporate Finance Approach to Climate Stabilizing Targets. Tell us what that actually means in practice. And also, it's something you've made open source. Why did you do that?
Yeah, so I guess it was 6 years ago now, in 2009, the company had done a carbon footprint for a couple years, but had not set a greenhouse gas target. And when we looked at the footprint, it was tiny. As a design software company, we're not a heavy manufacturer. It was a majority of those emissions were in our supply chain. And so we looked at what was considered best practice of the day, and were thoroughly disappointed with the results. They tended to be very short-term targets, or they tended to be intensity targets, in some cases which actually masked an absolute increase in emissions. Knowing full well that what the planet needed was an absolute reduction by 2050 of roughly 80 to 85% in all greenhouse gases in order to stabilize the climate at no more than 2 degrees, and knowing that 2 degrees itself was no picnic, but going beyond that was considered dangerous, we wanted to explore what a more robust and rigorous approach would look like. Unfortunately, at the time, there weren't a lot of people to talk to on this topic, though we had some wonderful conversations with BT Group out of the UK. And we ultimately spent part-time, but the better part of a year developing CFACT, a corporate finance approach to climate stabilizing targets. And when I took it to my CEO, who is himself a mathematician, we had a robust debate about the merits of this methodology. And in the end, he approved it, which was delightful to me, in part because it was actually a 10-year commitment, which was the longest I believe the company has ever committed to anything. And then we felt that this was a pre-competitive practice, but could lend us great credibility with our customers, with regulators. And because there was so little out there on science-based targets, we made it freely and openly available. We've since developed it into a web tool as opposed to a spreadsheet. And we've actually tailored it for cities who are increasingly important customers of ours.
We've been talking a lot, actually, at this event about science-based targets. Why is it important to align your own carbon mitigation strategies with those science-based targets?
It is our strategy on climate mitigation. So if we are able to reduce all of our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions in line with climate science, we've arguably done our fair share, or arguably done more than our fair share, because scope 3 are ultimately other people's emissions. And we also feel that it's lent us a great deal of legitimacy in the NGO sector. They've invited us to become advisors, to be profiled as a leading company. So it's had reputational benefits, of course. But internally, it's also pointed us to waste in the system. Travel was one of our leading sources of emissions, and we've invested millions upon millions of dollars in virtual conferencing, including very high quality virtual conferencing like telepresence systems, which has the corollary benefit of reducing wear and tear on our employees. So it's had retention benefits. Of course, it's impossible to measure the benefits in terms of attracting new employees, but we know qualitatively that new employees see our sustainability commitments and our sustainability products as a reason to join the company. And of course, being in the tech sector, the fight for talent is perhaps the most important fight of all.
Talk me through some of the key steps that you're taking as a company to, really reduce carbon emissions.
So the reductions in travel have been pretty significant from one year to the next. We've also looked and worked with our data center vendors. So we purchase a good amount of compute power, and then we have some direct suppliers of data centers. And of course, being a software company, moving from desktop products to the cloud, we actually recognized that in some ways we were inheriting a huge amount of emissions, because what had been an emission that theoretically occurred on the desktop of our customers was now something happening in our cloud. So we accounted for that, and we've actually felt we now have more control over reducing those emissions.
There's quite a lot that you've been doing there. Where would you say that you are now in terms of your journey? And where do you see yourself going? Where do you want to be?
So we want to be the leading provider of sustainability solutions to the design community. And we're told that that will be about 75% of the market by 2020. So we have to be the leading provider of sustainability solutions if we want to remain competitive. Operationally, we're on track. So we have met our science-based target every year, which represents about a 38% absolute reduction since we began in 2009. And we don't see any signs of missing that. We've given ourselves a little bit of flexibility in the CFACT methodology, which everyone is free to adopt or modify, which means that in any 5-year time period, if we miss the target, we can bank emissions in the next year and apply it retroactively. And I checked that with a number of environmental NGOs to make sure that we weren't kind of cheating the atmosphere, in the sense that an emission today actually matters quite a great deal tomorrow. And they felt that 5 years was a reasonable time frame and gave us the flexibility that meant our CFO and our CEO could sign off on it. So operationally, we're on track. We've just committed a few months ago to 100% renewable electricity by 2020. We've also made the commitment around responsible climate policy, though for us, I must admit, that was an easy one. My first call within the company was to our VP of Government Affairs to make sure that he was lobbying in line with our sustainability goals, and he absolutely was. So CFACT has been a wonderful kind of feather in our cap when approaching policymakers, when showing customers that we know what it is we're talking about. And then we can get into the commercial discussion of, given that we clearly have thought deeply about this subject, we think we can now sell you some sustainability products that have equal levels of rigor.
Obviously, it's the big year for the climate negotiations. What can a company like yourselves actually do to help raise the level of ambition and get the sort of outcome that everyone says that we need to avert runaway climate change?
Well, I think having a global price signal is very important. Companies are actually stepping up and setting these internal shadow prices. I'm interested by the fact that ExxonMobil's shadow price, internal price on carbon, is almost twice that of the White House's. I think that's fascinating. And so global companies like ourselves, we struggle quite a bit with regional compliance mechanisms. We would much prefer that the cap and trade systems are linked, for example, between California and the one that was just announced this morning in China, and then, of course, the European trading scheme. And that gives us long-term planning horizons, which is ultimately critical to business success. So I think a clear price signal and a global mechanism would be welcome at COP.
Now, this tool that you've developed to help others reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, you've turned it into this open source web tool. Tell us, how does that work? How can people actually use it?
So if you're a city or a corporation and you go to sustainability.autodesk.com, there you will find CFACT and the ability to plug in your baseline numbers. We also try and make it very easy for you to look up things like your contribution to GDP. And then, of course, next to all of those things, you'll see our sustainability solutions, which we would be happy to sell you.
Emma Stewart, thank you very much. That was Emma Stewart, who's the head of sustainability solutions at Autodesk. That's all we've got time for today. Do join us again soon. From all of us at the Climate Group, goodbye.